The eyes are the organs responsible for vision. The sclera is a tough protective outer layer composed mainly of collagen and elastin, which gives the eye its shape and white color. The retina is the innermost layer of the eye, covering the posterior 2/3 of its inner surface. The choroid is the outermost layer of the uvea. It is a pigmented layer of connective tissue and blood vessels found between the sclera and the retina. The conjunctiva is a thin, transparent mucous membrane that covers and protects the sclera at the front of the eye. The cornea is transparent, dome-shaped, and found at the front of the eye, covering the iris, pupil, and anterior chamber. The lens is a transparent, flexible disc that has a biconvex shape, thicker in the middle and thinner at the edges. The iris is found between the cornea and the lens in the anterior cavity of the eye. The ciliary processes are finger-like projections extending from the ciliary body that contain capillaries which produce aqueous humor. The ciliary muscle is made of smooth muscle fibers. It contracts and relaxes to change the tightness of the zonular fibers. Zonular fibers, also called suspensory ligaments, are delicate strands of tissue that connect the ciliary processes to the lens capsule. The hyaluronic canal is a thin transparent canal that runs through the posterior cavity of the eye, from the optic disc to the back of the lens. The optic nerve, also called the second cranial nerve, is responsible for transmitting visual information captured by the retina to the visual centers of the brain. The eye is supplied by branches of the ophthalmic artery, including the short posterior ciliary, long posterior ciliary, anterior ciliary, and central retinal arteries. The lacrimal sac, found between the lacrimal and the maxilla, acts as a reservoir for tears before draining into the nasal cavity. The lacrimal canaliculi are small channels in the eyelids that drain tears from the eye to the nasal cavity. The lacrimal gland is about the size of an almond and is found above the outer corner of the eye. They secrete tears made up of a combination of water, electrolytes, proteins, and mucus. Meibomian glands, also called tarsal glands, are specialized sebaceous glands found within the tarsal plates along the margin of the eyelids. The orbicularis oculi is a donut-shaped muscle that surrounds each eye. It is found right under the skin and has three major parts: orbital part, palpebral part, and deep or lacrimal part. The orbital septum is an extension of the periosteum, forming a weak membranous sheet. It extends from the orbital rim into each eyelid and blends with the tarsal plates. The levator palpebrae superioris is the muscle responsible for voluntarily raising the upper eyelid and keeping the eye open when one is awake. The superior oblique muscle originates from the body of the sphenoid bone near the apex of the orbit, extends forward and laterally, hooks around the trochlea, and inserts onto the sclera on the superolateral aspect of the eyeball. The inferior oblique muscle originates from the floor of the orbit near its medial wall and extends upward and laterally to insert into the sclera at the inferolateral aspect of the eyeball. The lateral rectus muscle originates from this common tendinous ring at the apex of the orbit and extends laterally to insert onto the sclera at the lateral aspect of the eyeball. The medial rectus muscle originates from this common tendinous ring at the apex of the orbit and extends medially to insert onto the sclera at the medial aspect of the eyeball. The inferior rectus muscle originates from this common tendinous ring at the apex of the orbit and extends downwards to insert onto the sclera at the inferior aspect of the eyeball. The superior rectus muscle originates from this common tendinous ring at the apex of the orbit and extends upward to insert onto the sclera at the superior aspect of the eyeball. The trochlea, also called the pulley of the superior oblique muscle, is a cartilaginous loop found on the supraromedial aspect of the orbit. The tarsal plates, also called tarsi, are fibrous bands of dense connective tissue found within the eyelids. The superior tarsus is larger and semilunar, while the inferior tarsus is smaller, thinner, and elliptical. The capsulopalpebral fascia is a thin, fibrous tissue that provides support to the lower eyelid. It is an expansion of the fascial sheaths of the inferior rectus and inferior oblique muscles. The palpebral ligaments are fibrous structures within the eyelids that provide structural support and stability. The medial palpebral ligament, found on the inner aspect of the eye, extends from the medial commissure of the eyelids to the frontal process of the maxilla and lacrimal bone. The lateral palpebral ligament, found on the outer aspect of the eye, extends from the lateral commissure of the eyelids to the zygomatic bone, cheekbone. The superior transverse ligament, also called Whitnell's ligament, is a fibrous band that runs horizontally above the eyeball, at the musculotendinous junction of the levator palpebri superioris muscle. The suspensory ligament of the eyeball, also called the Lockwood suspensory ligament, is a fibrous hammock-like structure that stabilizes and supports the position of the eyeball. Eyelashes are small, fine hairs that grow along the edges of the eyelids. They protect the eyes from debris, dust, and foreign objects, as well as help trigger the blink reflex when objects come close to the eyes.